The Army War College thinks that a war with either Russia or China, pick your poison, could cause about 3,600 casualties per day. So they want to draft. Raise your hand if you want to go to war for those statistics. Would you like to sign up to die to go to war with China or Russia?
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Yeah,
Bueller?
To further the military-industrial complex's warmongering ways to expand for no reason. Let's throw more people into a meat grinder and see how that works out for us.
Well, you may not have a choice. Go ahead, maybe.
I was just going to say, maybe that's why the military-age men are coming over here, because they know that we're not going to fall for that. There's a lot of people in this country going to be like, I'm not fighting your stupid wars. Now they got a whole bunch of people that will.
Okay,
Yes.
That's awful. That's awful to think about. Because
Yeah, hey, you want to come into our country? All of the people that live in the United States don't want to be involved in these wars. But maybe all of the people that are pouring across the borders into Eagle Pass, Texas from Venezuela, they'll sign right up and get government benefits and be thrown into the meat grinder.
Yeah, that's awful. I mean,
And probably true.
all lives are worth the same. So I don't like that. I don't want anybody conscripted into war. So you may not have a choice if this new academic paper for the Army is considered. Look at the very premise of this article. It's now, again, this is printed in the U.S. Army War College Academic Journal. So this is research they are presenting to the government to compel a draft. So it's called A Call to Action, Lessons from Ukraine for the Future. And it says that, we need to be forward thinking and we need to be as formidable. This part, again, this is something, sometimes you guys, I sit in my office studying and then I just throw my hands up and walk around the house and go, what the F?
So here's a little story. Yeah, her office is downstairs, mine is upstairs. And I'll just hear yells from down. I go, he'll hear what the heck? As we're preparing for the show for the day and we're going through data and research. And I go, what the heck?
These are lies. They're lying.
They're lying.
I just go nuts over this.
This is our operation while the kids are in school.
Yes. This part that I highlighted here made me just throw a scrunchie or something.
Very violent of you. The military would not hire you. Actually, the American military might hire you now because they want trans soldiers and everything else. So maybe just throwing a scrunchie is about as violent as they want the military.
I went there. Okay, so this very premise I object to, that we need to beef up again so we can win in the same way that the Army won Operation Desert Storm. So before I talk about a draft, can we just... I cannot let that go. Operation Desert Storm in 1991 killed tens of thousands of civilians. They weren't American, but we still care. They slaughtered Iraqi conscripts who were retreating from Kuwait on what came to be known as the Highways of Death and the Battle of Rumalia. Thousands of Iraqi troops were buried alive in their trenches by U.S. tanks, basically shoveling and plowing them down into their graves to die alive. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Much of the country's infrastructure was destroyed, and the Air Force admitted that it targeted water, sewer, and electrical facilities. They did so on the premise that Iraqis were not blameless for Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. Now, look at this quote from an Air Force officer to the Washington Post, I believe this was, saying that among the justifications offered now, particularly by the Air Force, is that Iraqi civilians were not blameless for Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. The definition of innocence gets to be a little bit unclear, he said. They do live there, and ultimately the people have some control over what goes on in their country. Well, we better hope to heck that Syria doesn't feel this way, that Libya doesn't feel this way. Otherwise, it would be torture of Americans for what our country does, right? By that rationale, Americans would be the victim of attack because our country invaded Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Iraq, which we're talking about right now. Imagine if that cut both ways. In fact, this is the rationale of terrorists. Your government's doing something bad, so I have to hurt civilians to get your attention. That makes us the terrorists.
It pisses me off so much because you're talking about people that are living under a regime that if they do try to rise up and fight the regime, that regime will kill them. And so our response to those people not putting themselves in that situation is to kill them.
Right.
What are those people supposed to do?
Right.
Right. Well, here's what they do. Then they flee that country, and then they pour across the borders of Europe and the United States because we've destabilized their country and they have nowhere else to go.
Right. And I don't know if Saddam Hussein would be considered a regime because we made him, right? And his people had a lot more freedom than, but okay, by that rationale, the narrative is they're not free, so we should kill them. That doesn't make any sense. Now, maybe what these authors mean by one desert storm is that few Americans died. That's only the official narrative because they're saying that only 400 people died, mostly from friendly fire or accidents. But according to Scott Horton in his great book, Enough Already, that number does not account for Gulf War illnesses. He points out here that the government and media skeptics tend to dismiss the Gulf War illnesses as psychosomatic syndrome, a mass hysteria. However, credible evidence emerged in the 1990s that causes as varied as this Kamisaya detonation, experimental anthrax vaccines, anti-sarin pills, and exposure to dust from depleted uranium munitions may have contributed to the suffering of thousands of veterans of that conflict, which would be still going on today. You guys, that was 30 years ago, he says, and the bombing has happened ever since. Now, notice this quote. He says that, like, after this conflict, George Bush said, "It's a proud day for America. By God, we've kicked the Vietnam syndrome once and for all." Well, what is the Vietnam syndrome? It's this idea that wars are useless. People die. That wasn't worth it. Shouldn't have done that. That's what we call Vietnam syndrome. So he said we needed a win so we don't feel the malaise of war as if it's not worth it.
We need some victories. I mean, that was the whole PR campaign for for Desert Storm. Tie a yellow ribbon around the tree. David, you remember that? Everyone had a yellow ribbon around the tree, and they vowed, the PR campaign was, we never want to show American bodies coming home at Dover Air Force Base. We want to make sure that the PR movement around Desert Storm is totally different from Vietnam. We won't allow reporters to go out and randomly film what's happening on the war zone. They'll be specifically embedded with certain units to look, make America look great. So it was a huge, massive PR campaign that they learned from the failures of the Vietnam PR campaign. Go ahead, David.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, there are people in these dark back rooms that are treating this like a chessboard, and they are planning all this, and they know exactly what they're doing. They know, if we can sacrifice this many American lives, we can destabilize this area, which will lead to us getting natural resources or whatever it happens to be. Make no mistake, they know exactly what they're doing. They have this all laid out, and they go in these rooms and they plan it in the secret of night and implement it.
Yeah.
Right. So already this paper is flawed with this whole, we won Desert Storm and we need to beef up to do it again. But let's keep going to see what they want of us in our blood sacrifice. The authors say that our military is moving away from counter-insurgency operations into more serious warfare. Again, I cannot agree with the word counterinsurgency. That's problematic. They did not do that. They waged wars, not went to counter them. The authors say that in order to go in and be ready for the future of warfare, the rules must be thrown out the window. This is the scariest bit that I've seen. I read this as, I'm going to tell you how I interpret it and then see if you agree with me. What I'm about to show you says, to me, we cannot be held to standards for war crimes as the American military. Read it for yourself. It says, when Mark Milley, served as the chief of staff of the Army, he explained mission command through a concept of disciplined disobedience, in which subordinates are empowered to accomplish a mission to achieve their task, even if they must disobey a specific order or task to do so. Without perfect communications, a subordinate officer or soldier must be trusted to make the right judgment call in the heat of battle. Mission command is not doctrine to be written, tested, and shelved. So basically, we can't write rules. Soldiers must be empowered to throw the rules out the window and do what they want here. And we need to be okay with that. That's scary. Does anyone read that as anything different? He says we cannot expect a brigade that micromanages garrison tasks to execute command operations successfully. So this says to me, when the media comes over and says, hey, you killed civilians here, that's unacceptable. Hey, you did this, this is unacceptable. They're like, we cannot be held to standards here. You can't write it down and expect us to follow the rules. So what are they calling it? Disciplined disobedience. You guys want to react to that? That's no rules of warfare?
No rules.
No war crimes? I mean, we already know that the United States is not a part of any kind of an international tribunal on war crimes because they would be taken to task for many.
That's why they avoid it, right? You don't want to be
yes.
dragged in front of the Hague. So here's how you don't take part in it. You don't become a part of it.
And now you say, hey, in the future, we need more disciplined disobedience. So soldiers going rogue and just like Taps. Like this is literally the movie Taps.
Yeah.
Everything goes, right? Anybody else find this disturbing?
Such a good movie.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So here's where they say that we need a draft. They say we cannot replace the people that we have calculated will die. Army theater medical planners anticipate a sustained rate of roughly 3,600 casualties per day. Should we just pause there for a second? This is what they think would happen in a war. 3,600 casualties per day.
With China and Russia, right?
Mostly Russia, but yes.
So they have repeatedly told us how America is not prepared for a double war with Russia or China. America is not even prepared for a war with China. We would lose a war with China. They would absorb everything we throw at them, right? As Colonel Douglas McGregor has pointed out on our show, they will absorb everything we throw at them. We'd have to travel thousands of miles against a brick wall, and they would absorb everything. And then on top of that, add in Russia. And so they're predicting 3,600 casualties per day. Day. So we just feed the meat grinder in order to keep the military-industrial complex going along. And 3,600 casualties doesn't mean deaths. It means incapacitated, disabled, and dead.
Right. And so
a variety of categories.
Well, let's
missing
look back
limbs,
at
missing
their
arms.
calculation. It says, yes, that includes casualties and injuries, non-battle injuries. So with a 25% predicted replacement rate, then the personnel will require 800 new personnel each day, which they say they're just not getting right now.
Where is Congress going to stand up and say,
you don't use lives like this?
Who is going to stand up in Congress and say, has everyone seen this paper? Has everyone seen what the Pentagon is planning, what the Biden administration is moving towards, and called for an end to this? Who signed up for this?
They've bypassed Congress now. It's an executive thing now. The executive branch is in control of all this stuff now. They don't even have to go to Congress anymore.
Right. You'd literally have to have a president, I guess, who would agree to sign a bill that would, or revoke war powers that they are still in existence since 9/11.
Yes.
So and of course, Dick Cheney and George W. Bush very brilliantly put in these additional executive powers to the executive branch. So they have these unbelievable powers. And they're not going to relinquish power. It would literally take a president coming in saying, I want less power.
Yeah.
To remove these powers.
Right.
Who's going to do that?
All right. So let's look more at their calculations. They say that the recruitment shortfall, nearly 50%, is a longitudinal problem, that this will just compound. Every infantry and armor soldier we do not recruit today is a strategic mobilization asset we will not have in 2031. Well, what happens in 2031? Will we be in a full-blown war there? Why are we using that year? Like maybe we could also have peace by 2031. What are they calculating for? They said, this reserves number was at about 700,000 in 1973. 450,000 in 1994. Now the reserves is only 76,000. So that is unsustainable. So what they're saying is that this conclusion at the bottom, large-scale combat operations, troop requirements, may well require a reconceptualization of the 70s and 80s volunteer force and move towards partial conscription, at least partial. So they want to conscript you because they are planning for 3,600 deaths per day. They say that today's warfare means that dramatically increased casualty rates will occur because technology just makes everything so fast. So this idea that you're just fighting by drones, they're saying is not the case because things move fast, you die faster. just ramps it all up, the speed of death. Sadly, again, this paper lies on the premise that we are still suffering from being demoralized due to the Vietnam War. Here's how they said that. The U.S. intervention in Vietnam left the army demoralized. And American leadership watched as the Soviet-equipped Egyptian army forces nearly defeated the U.S.-equipped Israeli forces in the Yom Kippur War. And so what you might logically be thinking is because, we were demoralized by Vietnam, we should think, let's not do that again.
Right. We learned our lesson.
They're doing the opposite. They're like, let's beef up to do that again.
Well,
the problem is nobody wants to, so let's make them.
And 3,000 a day, that's 1 million a year. That is 1 million people.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Hey, that's fine. As Madeleine Albright once said about, children being killed in combat, collateral damage. It's fine. It's totally fine.
Worth it.
Worth it. It's worth it.
But they don't give you a reason. They don't give you what it's for.
Depopulation is great too.
Yeah, I guess that's just what you have to do to be that beacon of democracy around the world. You just have to lose 1 million people a year to fight for democracy.
I mean, think about it as your family. Is this something there's no rationale here. It's just like, this is how we get ready for war that's coming by 2031, according to their calculations. It's not like we think it's necessary for democracy. We think we'll be saving lives. No, nobody thinks they're saving lives. It's just, we got to be ready for war because that's our business. So read this document for yourself. Let us know what you think of it in the chat below.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.